And middle mile is pretty robust, and there's ongoing discussions. Again, the consortium is providing comments for the 4 counties, and those opening comments are due today. We, Supervisor Haschak, Williams, and I have been discussing some of the intricacies and recommendations, and the one recommendation was to extend to Westport Union Landing from Cleone, because it serves the Westport community most importantly, but also enables us to contemplate creating our own fiber ring with the last mile dollars that we'll be receiving. Additional questions?
Just a comment. We did meet with Assemblymember Wood's office to go over the map and try to get a sense of what's reasonable to request as additional miles. And I walked away from that feeling like we're getting a fair share, and it's well contemplated, and trying to bring it up to Cleon makes sense, but I don't see a lot of other wiggle room. Does anybody else have looking at the map, have any thoughts on areas that we may not be covering with middle mile? Doesn't sound like it.
It does not sound like it. I should indicate that the other 3 counties of the North Bay Consortium are making significant additional requests. I think that the middle mile dollars are allocated somewhat based on density. And as I said, I think that this is a significant investment, and we're fairly satisfied with what they're offering. And rather than run the risk of asking too much, we're making a modest request due to our population base. Go ahead, Supervisor Haschak.
Yeah, so you were saying to connect the loop from Westport over to Laytonville, that would require the last mile dollars?
It would. I mean, and that's the idea. I mean, first of all, we want the middle mile to connect Westport. We could conceivably ask for the middle mile dollars rather than the last mile dollars to connect Branscombe Road. And we may or may not have the control, depending on some decisions we make with regard to whether or not we can point those dollars at Branscombe Road. Whether it's the most sensible use of the dollars, we'll determine that down the road when the time comes. But I think the answer to your question is yes. We're looking at the last
Jeff,
mile dollar. Go
Jeff,
right ahead.
am I muted? I guess not. I'm using my iPhone. I'm not used to using Zoom on it. To me, one of the arguments for having to go across Branscombe Road is the matter of developing a robust and redundant system. When Tom West and Mitch Drake designed Golden Bear Broadband, there was a loop that came from Laytonville through Branscombe over to Westport and then south. Is there any, and maybe it's politically, it's something that Ted and John don't think is desirable to do, but is there any value in raising that point with Assemblyman Wood that I mean, the population in Branscombe is relatively small, but the argument of having a more reliable loop, particularly with all the fires that we have going on in this state, is there any value in trying to pursue that?
I think there is, and we have made that request with Wood's office, and I feel confident they'll represent us trying to find the balance of not giving up what we currently have in the plan and seeing if we can get a little bit more. If we can't zoom out here, but I think there is redundancy. And so, if I were in a more urban area looking at this, I would say Mendocino has redundancy. If you go north of Humboldt, that line doesn't terminate It does. So it's kind of the granularity. I think we're finding it's a fine line. We want to try to argue for more, but we're also recognizing that based on our population, this may be a good deal. It may be that the state did a fairly decent job of balancing priorities across the landscape.
Okay, that's good. The issue's been raised. Thank you, Ted.
And so backtracking with regard to the roles and responsibilities of the members of the Middle Mile Advisory Committee and their organizations, there's a broadband digital literacy element as well in the funding, and that's separate part of the 6.25 billion. A third-party administrator has been appointed as of yesterday, and it's Scenic, which is Tom West's former organization, and they've been very responsive and easy to work with. I think that we applaud that decision on the part of the state. The CPUC provides the data and is intimately involved in the development of the last mile and middle mile mapping, including providing the data. Caltrans will be working with a third-party administrator to manage the construction. Any questions? And so we're now moving on to the last mile funding, and I briefly outlined how it works, but again, it is out of the $1 billion allocated to the rural counties, 5 million goes to each county, and then based on the percentage of unserved households within the category of urban rural counties, the remainder of the $1 billion is allocated. The CPUC will be using its most recent data, which isn't publicly available, but based on what is publicly available, the last two data sets have Mendocino counties take ranging from 35 million to 70 million. And with such a wide range, we can't predict what the final outcome will be. But it will not be insubstantial. So, I mean, matters of whether or not we can string fiber along Branscombe Road, whether that's the highest and best use for the money, will be determined by how much money we have and many other considerations. It's a fantastic investment. So,
could I ask a question? Who's going to decide how that money, whatever it is we get, is spent in our county? Who's in charge of deciding?
So there's some moving pieces here. One is there's a JPA that's been proposed by RCRC that would include all 37 counties. Mm-hmm. And they would help with the planning and putting together an entity to own deployment. And I imagine a lot of the actual work would be contracted out. But the thinking is a lot of the rural counties lack staffing to pull off credible deployment. And by pooling resources and having a team that's looking at all 37 counties, we're likely to be more successful. We haven't yet joined. I imagine it'll be coming to the county soon. There's some open questions about what does pooling resources mean in terms of the priority list. We don't want to pool resources and then not see deployment for the next 5 to 10 years because we're towards the bottom. And frankly, we're probably one of the most expensive per household cases they're going to look at. So it's a long way to say it's a bit up in the air, but the current thinking seems to be we're stronger working together as rural counties than independently. What's clear from the dollar amount, we're not going to be able to do fiber to the home. There's just no way. There's such a gap. It's an order of magnitude difference. So we have our state reps fighting for the state portion of it, the middle mile, to be fiber. And we want to fight with them. We don't want that to turn into a subsidy for wireless carriers. But where they terminate, when Jeff was showing the map of where that middle mile will run, all of the communities that are not along that path will likely need to be served with wireless. And it brings up, RCRC has a map that shows the counties that have a plan today versus the counties that need a planning effort. And we were down, or right now we're down as a county that already has a plan. That may need to shift. We had a really great plan that Tom West helped formulate, but that was based on fiber to the home. And what we're seeing is we won't get anywhere near enough funding to pull those plans off.
So, I mean,